Hey class, this is Jacob Strong. So, today for the final speech, I'm definitely going to be talking about my persuasive speech. So, although neither of my speeches were perfect, I decided to talk about my persuasive speech. So, because I talked about homosexuality in the Bible, and this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, I decided that because I thought it definitely could grow the most, that's what I wanted to talk about. So, just starting off, some of my speech was too long, and my points definitely could have contained more information, and I could explain them better. So, for example, if I had more time, I definitely would have read each of the pieces of the scripture in Greek and explained it step by step for the audience. Because most people don't actually know Greek, I definitely thought I could have used more of an explanation. So, my research required me to need more than 5 to 6 minutes as well. So, for the time constraint, it was really difficult to be able to go through all the research I had and break it down to a layman's terms. So, I definitely think that the time constraint was the hardest part of the speech. So, having too much information for a short amount of time made me have less personality while I gave the speech. And so this was definitely a problem because I chose this topic because it's so personal to me. Yet when I look back on it, it definitely lacked a lot of personality. So if I definitely had to do it all again, I definitely would have made the speech longer than the proper length. So I probably would have been maybe, like 10 to 12 minutes because at least I could have covered some of the things that I learned from the book. And this really focusing on like be passionate about what you're talking about. But I had to rush through it. So I wasn't able to break down and really explain and show who I am through it. So if I were to do it again, I definitely would have just taken the lower grade and made it more personable. So, the things that I'll be talking about today in this speech specifically is identify my speech. So, then I will be talking about the most challenging part of the speech. And then I will be talking about what I would change about my speech, more specifically. So, as I already stated, I will be talking about my persuasive speech. Additionally, I will be discussing how I'm able to acquire the information as fast as I did, and why homosexuality in the Bible is something that I have definitely been exploring for a long time. And because this is something I've been exploring for a long time, I was able to have a lot of the information already set up for myself. So, just giving a basic history to how I came to really want to understand this information is because I'm a gay man, but I also consider myself to be a Christian man. And I decided to change my degree from accounting to religion and philosophy. And this is one of those questions that I definitely wanted to search out. And so the first time that I was ever presented with, at Roberts, concerning homosexuality and the Bible was in my introduction to New Testament class that I had with Dr. David Carr. And in class, when we went over 1 Corinthians, we talked about how this was a controversial topic, and especially now for the school, because now that the school is federally funded, they can't discriminate against people for being gay, which in part is one of the reasons why I decided to come to Roberts, because they could no longer make students sign a waiver saying that they were not gay. And so I decided to... So in the class, we talked about how that this seemed to be more of an ancient tradition based on like young boys being sold to men, and how although the church affirms that homosexuality should not be allowed, that when you actually break down the history, as even Dr. Carr had noted, that this seems to be more of something that's not about actually homosexuality, and it seemed to be more about inappropriate relationships between men and children. And so this information led me to go on later, and so I ended up taking liturgical Koine Greek, and because I took Greek, I was able to actually learn what Dr. Carr was talking about. And because I learned about what was being discussed, I was able to actually break down the word arsenokoite and make some decisions for myself. So this is a topic that you really have to be educated in doing, and because I had a lot of education understanding Greek, I was able to do history quite easily to figure out, what the church's stance was, why the church's stance was, and I was definitely able to talk about that in my speech, but I definitely could have focused on that more. So, moving on, the most challenging part of my speech. So, I definitely would have said the time limit was the most challenging fit. So, 5 to 6 minutes for discussing this topic was not possible. So when I made the speech, originally when I had given it, it was about 11 minutes. And because of my in-depth explanation and actually going through the Greek and reading the verses in Greek, and I decided to cut it because it was too long. And now if I had to do it again, I definitely would have made it longer and just took the lower grade, because it definitely needed the explanation to, I think, make more sense. And because I have done so much research on the topic, I think that it came across as that I actually didn't really know what I was talking about, and that I was subjective, even though I really view this topic objectively, and I would never want to make a decision about something this important just because I'm gay, and it's important to me that this decision about whether or not homosexuality is allowed or not is, obviously I want to be supported by the church, and so, but I definitely would make the objective decision as to whether or not, about what history says. And so, moving on, so what would I change about my persuasive speech? So, I definitely, if I were to make the speech again, as I said earlier, I would have just made the length just longer. So the lack of personality in my speech would have been reflected in the required amount of time. Because I'm so passionate about this topic, I should have just accepted an even worse grade, because it matters more to me that this topic actually made sense to people, rather than trying to just get the better grade because of criteria. So what I definitely have taken away most from the reading is that in order to have a good speech, you need to have passion about what you're talking about. So when I look back on the speech, there's no passion there. However, this lack of passion was due to many things. So, of course, the time requirement, but I also was genuinely really sick, and I had COVID. And, I definitely had a lot of this information already at my... So, I had this at my leisure, but because, I've probably spent about 2 years of research doing a lot of this, but it didn't seem like it came across that way when I look back on it. And so I definitely was sick, but I don't know, it definitely just seemed unprofessional. And so, unlike my informal speech where I was able to go to the classroom and I was able to break down what I was talking about, and for this one, I definitely was really frustrated. My technology wasn't working. I had COVID, so I just wanted to get it done. And additionally, I definitely think one of the things I needed to work on was eye contact. And so one of the problems was because I was sick, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. And when you don't have a lot of time to prepare, then memorizing what you're going to say is really difficult, especially when you're sick. So, just concluding, I was I'm definitely glad that I'm able to look back and have this opportunity to be able to talk about, homosexuality in the Bible and my persuasive speech, because if I could do it again, I would do it again differently. But because of what I've learned in the class, I'm able to understand how I could have improved it. And, with some extra time and because of the time constraint, really going over something that needs such in-depth detail may have been not the best choice, and maybe I should have picked something different. So that is my speech, and thanks.